There are many things which mark a captain as great in Star Trek, and the franchise has no shortage of people who've earned the description. There are Janeways, there are Siskos, there are even Boimlers, when the situation really, truly, desperately needs it. Commanding a starship is a big responsibility, something these following people you should have tried to remember. There are traits that a great captain cannot possess if they want to be remembered with honour. One cannot be selfish, one cannot be impulsive to the point of willful, one must put the lives and well-being of the crew under their command first. Some of them were tested and they didn't quite match up. Some of them had an unfair set of obstacles in their paths, but proved they were neither adaptable nor willing to listen to reason. Becoming a captain in the Star Trek universe is supposed to be hard, so one honestly is left wondering how in the name of Boothby did they achieve it. I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here are the 10 worst ever captains in Star Trek. Number 10. Captain Benjamin Maxwell, USS Phoenix. While there is an undeniable element of tragedy to his story, as well as a certain degree of thematic vindication that came later on, the irrefutable fact is that Captain Benjamin Maxwell took a Starfleet ship and waged a one-man war. His actions were not simply anathema to Gene Roddenberry's tenets for Star Trek, but ran the risk of plunging the Alpha Quadrant into a preemptive, bloody struggle. His justification for his actions was weak, claiming that information came his way. He attempted to sway Picard to his way of thinking. The Cardassians, he believed, were absolutely getting ready for a new offensive against the Federation. There was simply no other way of looking at it. While he may very well have been correct, and the events that followed Ducat's negotiations with the Dominion certainly seemed to prove him right, Maxwell took matters into his own hands. Without any formal declarations, he ordered the Phoenix into Cardassian territory, attacked depots and ships, killing hundreds of Cardassians. This, added with his own personal trauma left over from the massacre at Setlik III, confirmed that, while there may be romanticized songs about the hero who tried to stop a war by fighting one, Maxwell misunderstood what it meant to be a captain in Starfleet. Number 9. Captain Rudolph Rudy Ransom, USS Equinox. Captain Rudy Ransom was a well-respected officer in Starfleet by the time his ship and crew were whisked off to the Delta Quadrant. There are easy parallels with Voyager's journey, though Ransom becomes the darker side of Janeway's soul, making those decisions that we, the audience, never thought possible. How far does one go to get their ship and crew home? In a way, Ransom went above and beyond to ensure the safety of his crew, yet this argument falls flat when one stops to consider the loss of life along the way. His plan to continue harvesting alien bodies to boost the warp core was shown to be brutal, and to result in near constant acts of reprisal. These reprisals saw more and more of his crew killed. Before any of that, Ransom gave the fateful command to ignore the sovereign borders of the Cortonan Guard. This foolhardy act saw half his crew killed within weeks of their arrival in the Delta Quadrant. When compared with Janeway's command, it is clear that Ransom was the wrong man for the job, with several personality traits that should have seen him flushed out of command training before ever becoming captain of the Equinox. Number 8. Captain John Harman, USS Enterprise B. Beta canon has done a lot to redeem this young captain in the eyes of Star Trek fans, yet it has also filled in some of the blanks, explaining how exactly he came to command the Enterprise B on its fateful maiden voyage. Captain John Harman was fresh off the assembly line when the new Enterprise encountered the Nexus energy ribbon. He was, to put it simply, completely unprepared to deal with anything out of the ordinary. While Captain Kirk may have been stunned that the ship left space dock without a tractor beam, frankly audiences were left stunned that the ship left with a man so green in charge. The expanded universe revealed that Harman had used his family connections to fast-track him through captain school, thus effectively abusing his family's position to get himself that first command. As is often the case with untested commanders, people are killed. From history's point of view, Harman led the mission that saw James T. Kirk killed in action, which would leave a black mark against his name for almost a century following. Harriman's strengths, according to Beta Canon, lay outside of Starship Command and closer to intelligence operations. Some people simply don't suit certain positions. Number 7. Fleet Admiral Elizabeth Shelby, Starfleet. This entry is one of the more frustrating on this list, as there were few officers in the fleet who had quite the potential as Elizabeth Shelby. There is no doubt that her expertise and drive are what combined to see her ascend to command the entirety of Starfleet, but at the last hurdle she seemed unable to see the wood for the trees. Shelby was the expert when it came to the Borg, proving critical to the survival of the Enterprise D during the Wolf 359 incident. That officer looked set to command her own ship in a matter of months, having not only earned the respect of her new crew, but those above her as well. Nearly 30 years later, Shelby had ascended the ranks to become a 5-pip admiral, commanding the Enterprise F on her ceremonial final voyage, and had personally supported linking the entire fleet together with a program that was so easily hacked. Shelby transformed from the bright, incredibly astute expert on the Borg to become their welcoming party by Frontier Day of 2401. She not only accepted but endorsed a program that was so obviously Borg-like. Perhaps her ascent was too quick, not allowing for the perspective to follow, but Shelby commanded the fleet on the day it was almost destroyed, seemingly falling to Borg drones in the opening moments of the battle. It was a sad end to what should have been a powerful legacy. Number 6. Captain Tim Waters, USS Valiant. For Tim Waters, school ended rather suddenly, and his crew were the worse for it. Caught behind enemy lines on a training cruise as the Dominion War broke out, Waters and the rest of Red Squad found themselves given field commissions when the officers on board were killed. One tries to be fair to Waters. He couldn't have any experience bar what he learned on the go. Perhaps if he had the opportunity to serve as an officer on another starship, observing seasoned commanders in their day-to-day, but that was not to be his fate. Emboldened not just by his situation, but also by his previous special treatment as part of Red Squad, Waters truly believed he was ready to command. By the time Jake and Nog arrived on the Valiant, Waters was barely sleeping, using stimulants to remain active in his role. Already breaking under the pressure, he foolishly ordered an attack on the much larger, much more powerful Jem'Hadar battleship, sealing both his and most of his crew's fates in the process. Nog sums it up perfectly as he tries to console Dorian Collins. He may have been a hero, he may even have been a great man, but in the end, he was a bad captain. Number 5. Captain Alonzo Vmir, USS Ibn Majid. Though only seen in a photograph in broken pieces, Captain Alonzo Vmir commanded the USS Ibn Majid, Cristobal Rios's previous posting. When the ship encountered a pair of androids in the Vite sector, Vmir was ordered to destroy them immediately by Commodore O, or face the destruction of the Ibn Majid with all hands. Not only did Vmir comply, but he then took his own life afterwards, all of this without a word of explanation to his crew. The confusion and terror that tore through the ship is embodied in Rios, who left the service unable to reconcile with what he had seen. History loves to judge the actions of those who can't defend themselves, but it is rather difficult to fathom Vmir not taking a bare second to question this order of execution. If it affected him so deeply that he felt suicide was his only course of action, then this belies Rios' belief that Vmir hid behind the pair's android nature to justify his actions. Vmir sadly now has the legacy of a man in such a rush to obey orders that he couldn't stop to think about these orders. This cost him his life, the lives of Beautiful Flower and Jada, and almost cost the sanity of Rios as well. Number 4. Commodore Matt Decker, USS Constellation. Captain Decker was assigned command of the Constellation in 2245 and remained her commander until its destruction in 2267. He was considered one of the finest captains in the fleet by the time that Saru went looking for inspiration in Choose Your Pain, receiving a promotion to Commodore in 2263. How, then, does a man so promising end up on a list such as this? The Constellation's fateful encounter with the planet killer utterly broke the man. They engaged the living weapon only to discover that their ship was outmatched and outgunned. Decker ordered his entire crew to beam down to the nearby L3743 when the ship lost power, though this condemned them all to death as the unironically named weapon destroyed the world on which they stood. When Decker was found by the Enterprise alone on the hulk of his vessel, he initially refused to leave, claiming to have never lost a command before. He then attempted to order the Enterprise to attack the planet killer, believing in his madness that this time it would be different. He was quickly relieved of his position. History has mixed views on Decker. His career should speak for itself, yet in his final days he engaged an enemy he was hopelessly unprepared to face, got his entire crew killed, and almost lost a second ship in the process. Number 3. Captain Clark Terrell, USS Reliant. The events that led to the death of Spock and the creation of the Genesis planet reached a boiling point as Captain Clark Terrell commanded the USS Reliant. The ship was ordered to scout testing sites for Carol Marcus's Project Genesis, leading Terrell into the clutches of one Khan Noonien Singh. When the ship arrives in orbit of supposedly SETI Alpha 6, Chekhov tells him that there is life down there. Terrell opts to beam down, with Chekhov, the first officer, to check. Though Terrell is not the only captain in the fleet to make the bizarre decision to send the two highest-ranking officers down to an uncharted world, his actions have such immediate and dire consequences that it's difficult not to judge him too harshly. He is directly responsible, however inadvertently, for Khan's escape. One small measure of mercy is that his crew aren't killed as punishment, though they are marooned on Ceti Alpha 5. Terrell pays for his mistake with his life, so it will remain up to the judgment of history as to whether this was deserved or not. Number 2. Captain Ronald Tracy, USS Exeter. I'm in two minds about Captain Ronald Tracy. There's little doubt that his final mission was marred by events that would sully his reputation for the rest of history, though he wasn't a truly evil man, nor even a particularly bad commander. He was, if anything, unlucky. Tracy, along with his landing party, beamed down to a planet that infected them with a deadly virus. This virus was then brought aboard the Exeter, killing the entire crew. Tracy, down on the planet's surface, survived and came to believe that the planet was akin to the Fountain of Youth. Tracy differs from Matt Decker, for example, in that the death of his crew was an unforeseeable accident, rather than beaming them directly into harm's way. It was Tracy's actions after the death of his crew that sees him added to this list. His mental state might allow for some sympathy, but he abused his knowledge and technological superiority to gain dominion over the locals. His is a name that joins an increasingly large list of captains who ruined their entire careers in their last missions. As the saying goes, you're only as good as your last job. Number 1. Captain JT Estabon, USS Grissom. Captain JT Estabon was the quintessential by-the-book commander of the USS Grissom. Assigned to study the newly created Genesis planet, he was a man so utterly suited to desk work that it is a wonder he ever achieved the rank of captain at all. Perhaps he would be the poster child for dot every I and cross every T, as it's clear he never had an original thought in his head. When Savick and David Marcus discover a life sign on the planet, they immediately request that the Grissom beam it up. Estabon flatly refuses, citing Starfleet regulations preventing him from doing so. To be fair, it is less that he refused to beam the potentially hostile lifeform aboard that stands against him, but rather the fact he couldn't see past the book he clung to so dearly. His actions would probably feed debate for some time to come. Did he technically do anything wrong on the Grissom's final voyage? Was he merely a man who was less an individual and more an amalgamation of regulations stuffed into a Starfleet uniform? Whatever the more accurate label, he may end up a footnote in history as the captain who didn't even order his shields raised when a Klingon bird of prey decloaked directly to aft. And with that in mind, I have been Sean Ferrick, and thank you very much for watching along. You are awesome, you are brilliant. Please make sure you follow us on the various socials at TrekCulture. You will find us. Until I see you again, look after yourselves. You are wonderful, you are brilliant, and sometimes you don't have to go strictly by the book. Thanks very much.